Ma! Ma, he's doing it again!
What's he doing?
He's making another Fatal Frame video! Just because Fatal Frame wrapped up the majority of the story with the original PS2 trilogy doesn't mean that things are over, as there are many more spooky ghost haunting times to be had, especially with Fatal Frame 2 Remake that just came out. There is hope that the franchise will actually go somewhere. Maybe. But then again, Koei Tecmo might just continue their mash the A button simulator, as that's what's popular these days, isn't it? In a world where terms like Unkslop are floating around to describe basically any game that came out before 2015, gamers are more resistant to games that force you to think outside the box. I just want to go on record though and say that I do think that Gen Z is overhated when it comes to the modern gaming scene. They actually do have some great games available to them. Hell, it's a better time now to be a gamer than ever, due to not only the many modern innovations, but the plethora of old content that is now easier to access than ever thanks to emulation devices. Like I said many times before, 10-year-old me would crap their pants if you told them they could play Ocarina of Time while sitting on the toilet, or they could fit hundreds of PS2 games on an SD card. What I'm saying is that the yellow paint controversy I don't think is as bad as people say it is. Sure, it's stupid and it breaks immersion, and yes, I'd prefer games not have it, but it's far from the greatest sin that gaming has ever conjured up. There is one other thing I do have to say about how fortunate Gen Z are when it comes to gaming too, and that's the plethora of fan translations and re-releases of games that never saw a Western release. Back in the day, if the game never left the shores of Nippon, you were just completely out of luck. For a scant few games, a fan translation might exist, but for more complex consoles, getting said patches working was a bit trickier and usually required a modded system, as emulation of newer devices would be a lot more taxing on your computer. And modding consoles back in the day actually required modifying the hardware, which wasn't easy, and having access to the tools wasn't exactly something that most people had. Soft modding became more popular as time went on just because of the fact that it's easier to get into and people started finding new workarounds to get into it. These days though, most of those games are easy to get running, but it wasn't the case back then. So imagine how American Fatal Frame fans felt back in 2008 when Fatal Frame 4 The Mask of the Lunar Eclipse released exclusively on the Nintendo Wii. In Japan. This game was a unique monster as it released in the heyday of the Wii just as it started to lose steam. By 2008, the PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360 were starting to pick up momentum and were seen as platforms for the more serious games or the cool gamer. The Wii was not to be laughed at though, as it sold a respectable 101 million units. Though many will argue it's due to the focusing heavily on growing casual crowd, as most people I knew, myself included, mostly bought the Wii for Wii exclusives. Nintendo would drastically overestimate this casual crowd next generation as well, by the way, but that's a story for another day. The point is, the Wii had a lot of genres that were underrepresented, and horror games was one of those genres, unfortunately. That's not to say that it didn't have horror games, it just paled in comparison to the offers of its more powerful competitors. So when you combine a niche horror series with a console not known for horror games, you end up with a game that might struggle to find an audience. And it's clear that Koei Tecmo assumed just as much, as Fatal Frame 4 wouldn't officially arrive in the States outside of a fan translation patch until 2023, where it was nicely remastered for modern consoles. Getting the fan translation patch wasn't exactly an easy feat either, because it required modding your Wii, which back then a lot of people were too afraid to mod a console that was brand new. Especially considering the Wii was very hard to get when it came out and a lot of people had to buy them off scalpers, so they end up having to overpay for the damn thing. Sadly, there was no physical release for the US for the remaster, which is a growing trend with this franchise. Fortunately, I actually picked up a copy from Hong Kong, and that's the version you'll be seeing in this video. Now, despite this being the PS4 disc, I am actually playing the PS5 upgraded version, so that's what you'll be seeing on screen. We could talk about how the original Wii game compares, but I mean realistically, besides graphics and the motion controls, it's really not that much different. But you can clearly see how graphically inferior it is comparatively. The Wii version looking more in line with PS2 graphics that we saw with Fatal Frame 3. The only real difference is the removal of the motion controls, which I'm sure no one is sad about. Realistically though, if you wanted access to this game, the remaster is going to be your easiest entry point anyway, due to it being far more accessible because even if you play the Wii version, you need a Japanese Wii, or a modded Wii, a copy of the game which you have to import from Japan, and of course the technical knowledge of how to get the patch working. Fatal Frame 4 finally got its time to shine over here in the West in 2023, but the question is, where does it stand among the original trilogy? Is it a huge step forward for the franchise, or is it a huge misstep that we should pretend doesn't exist? Well, if you're watching this video, I'm assuming you're hoping for an answer to that question, so it's best to keep watching. This is most definitely an interesting game, but before we talk about the core elements of the game, we need to get the remastered stuff just out of the way. The character models are very, very, very detailed, albeit their animations are fairly stiff. I'm not sure this game was done using motion capture, but I'm going to assume not. I mean, the models look stunning though.
Margaret, you look stunning.
But this brings me to a point that I find an odd choice. The environments definitely did not get touched up nearly as much as the models. Don't get me wrong though, they look great compared to the original, but the character models look so much more detailed in the environment they're exploring. It's not too bad in most areas, but when you come across a place or two where the textures just look a little bit low res when you're standing in the light, so it's worth pointing out. Aside from that though, the environment feels very much like it is a setting of a Fatal Frame game, albeit with a lot less outdoor areas, as most of the action takes place indoors with a few smaller outdoor sections. The biggest change has to be how the game controls, as no longer are we dealing with the Silent Hill-esque semi-fixed camera angles, and instead we have an over-the-shoulder perspective, making combat encounters far more fluid and action-oriented. Gone is the fighting with the controls as you take on ghosts, and now the challenge feels far more fair, as you have a lot more ability to maneuver your way around while you engage in camera-based combat with the living impaired. Thanks to the improved visuals, the ghosts are far more detailed than ever, and might just catch you off guard from time to time with their appearances. While the original game used obscuring the visuals more to sort of make your imagination fill in the blanks, Fatal Frame 4 uses direct visuals instead. Like the previous game, you're split between multiple protagonists, each with their own camera, and each camera having different capabilities and lenses available to that camera. And even a new weapon entirely with the Spirit Stone flashlight, which we'll get to that, don't worry. Thanks to the improved controls though, the game feels a lot more comfortable throwing larger amounts of ghosts to the player to take out, as combat is more frequent than ever in this fourth entry, and you'll find yourself in encounters fairly frequently, which isn't a bad thing, as these encounters are actually genuinely fun. I genuinely had a good time taking these ghosts out. While we're talking about changes from the previous entries in the series to this one though, we should talk about voice acting, which features a very significant difference between the previous entries. Since this game originally only released in Japan and was only remastered for the West in 2023, unlike the previous games which are known for their horrendously bad voice acting,
I captured a ghost with this camera. This camera has the power to expose things the normal eye can't see.
and their incredibly stiff dialogue,
I heard this house was haunted. Too bad it's not.
Fatal Frame 4 decided to skip out on dubbing the game in English at all, and instead presents it in original Japanese with English subtitles, which to be honest, I'm not mad about, as that's how it should be in the first place. I've always been a proponent of believing that you should listen to things in the original audio so you can get the original intent. Now, of course, there are a few times where I make exceptions to that. So audio-wise, everything just sounds a lot better overall, as you're not having immersion broken by poor voice acting, and it really makes you wish that the previous games had the option to use the original Japanese audio instead. I think fans have even made an undubbed patch for those games as well. Gameplay-wise, this one felt a lot less confusing about where to go, because the new camera perspective makes it significantly easier to spot items that were otherwise easy to miss with the previous style of gameplay, because something you might need to interact with to progress is hard to notice when you can't directly see what you're looking at. You might get stuck from time to time, but I definitely felt Fatal Frame 1 had this problem far more than this game did. The design still suffers from the retreading the same ground issue though, as despite playing as multiple characters, you're all exploring the same building, so you'll find yourself revisiting the same areas multiple times with different characters, until you end up seeing something new. When you finally do see something new though, it at least does feel interesting, like you were rewarded for your perseverance. Overall, I do feel like the building you explore feels bigger this time around, and the pace of the game feels much less slow than previous entries as well. There's more action, more cutscenes, and more story. Speaking of story, we have to get to that, because that's probably the biggest change. Fatal Frame 4 has the biggest shakeup when it comes to story, because rather than continue directly from the story of Miku from Fatal Frame 1 and 3, or Mio from Fatal Frame 2, or Rei from the third entry, and connect itself to their stories, Fatal Frame 4 works as a standalone game with an all-new cast. The events of Fatal Frame 4 are completely independent of the original trilogy, existing in the same universe and borrowing bits and pieces that connected to the previous entries, but telling an all-new story about new characters who are not directly connected to Miku, Mio, or Rei. It's all in a new location entirely. I think the idea was to sort of serve as a new chapter in the franchise, or possibly just meant as a standalone game. It's hard to say which. The plus side is it means it can be enjoyed independently with no prior knowledge of the previous 3 games, if you didn't own them back in the day, or if you didn't have a means to play them with the remaster that came out in 2023. which most people didn't due to those entries being only released digitally on the PlayStation 3, which hasn't been in production for closing in on 15 years now. So if you're new to the franchise, this is a decent introduction point for you, as you can play this one and not have any knowledge of what happened to the previous games. What's cool is we learn a bit more about the Camera Obscura's origins, and like I said in my Fatal Frame 3 video, there are multiple Camera Obscuras, every one of them being slightly different. So what is even going on here? Well, 10 years prior to the events of the game, 5 girls were kidnapped on this island, known as Regetsu Island, during some kind of festival. They were all rescued by a detective named Choshiro Kirishima, and all was well until 2 of the girls recently died under mysterious circumstances. So we have Ruka, Misaki, and Madoka all returning to the island to investigate what really happened 10 years ago after their rescue. We take on the role of Madoka first, who finds the Camera Obscura, but in the end is overwhelmed by spirits who ultimately take her, and thus the prologue concludes with the first playable character dead, and then we don't play as her anymore. Yep, game starts with one of your characters dying right away. We're next introduced to Ruka, who get used to her because we're going to be playing a large portion of this game as her. She follows Madoka to a room where it's discovered that Madoka has died and is actually a malicious spirit now that attacks Ruka on sight. After defeating her, we're introduced to Misaki, the next playable character. It's revealed through Misaki that Madoka had some history with this place and a girl in black named Ayako. Then we get to play as Choshiro Kirishima. Unlike the other characters, he's only alarmed with a flashlight and holy crap! Damn! At first glance, you might think, oh, it's a flashlight, this character's gonna suck. But this flashlight is the deadliest weapon in the Fatal Frame series. This thing takes mass ghosts out in seconds. Choshiro basically can wipe out entire ghost populations with ease with this thing. While other characters might be able to damage 1 or 2 ghosts at a time if they line up their shots very carefully, this guy can just mass destroy the spirits with ease. Look at my boy go to work. This is almost comical how effective this thing is. This weapon is so satisfying to use, even at lower upgrades it is insanely overpowered. At max upgrades, this weapon basically makes enemies a complete joke. This guy puts the damn Ghostbusters to shame. This thing not only is broken in every sense of the word to the point where it makes the game not even survival horror anymore because, let's face it, the ghosts are the ones who are afraid of you with this thing, but it also makes no sense as well. You can get a lens for this thing that makes it take pictures too. I don't even know how that works. Where does it even spit them out? Seriously, nothing about this thing makes sense. But damn if it isn't super satisfying to use. It's basically the Elder Wand of ghost busting. Choshiro is an absolute menace for bringing this thing. Choshiro, when he's not messing up Ghost Day though, is apparently here to find Ruka, whose mother sent him to go looking for her after she came to the island. What's really going on here though is that the Regetsu Hall, where this game takes place, was originally a hospital for treating a mysterious disease known as Moonlight Syndrome, which was a condition that was unique to this island and caused patients to slowly lose their sense of self. The hall was used as a place for unethical and illegal experiments, which ultimately led to the Rite of Descent ritual that was used years ago, which is where the 5 girls were used as part of the ritual, which ultimately failed due to the mask that was used. The mask, which was the mask of the lunar eclipse, was actually flawed, which caused the one enduring the ritual put a curse on the island that spread madness everywhere and killed virtually everyone there. To undo everything, the proper mask of the lunar eclipse must be used, and while Choshiro is delving deeper into the facility, the truth comes out. Yep, our ghost-busting badass here was actually a ghost himself the entire time. Choshiro actually died pursuing a serial killer on the island years prior, and once he realized the fact, he's able to pass on. Everything is left to Ruka, who then places the mask, exorcises the spirit from the ritual, and the day is saved. Keeping in tradition with other Fatal Frame games, several characters do not survive the events of the night, which makes it feel a lot less predictable as the story goes on. Story-wise, it's pretty good stuff. I'd say it's on par with the previous entries. It's no Chrono Trigger, sure, but it's pretty damn good. Things tie up nicely, and again, you don't need to understand the previous games to really get a feel for what's going on, so you're getting a pretty great story here and it's pretty easy to follow. Probably more so than the previous games even. Now if only the story for Final Fantasy XIII was this interesting. Fatal Frame 4 has a plethora of extra content. For starters, you have the ghost hunting minigame, as always, and it feels more entertaining this time around solely because of how much better the controls are. Honestly, I would have loved a gauntlet mode that takes you through the entire game like this. It would seriously kick ass. And of course you have extra costumes, with your end goal getting all the girls in bikinis, because Japan, I guess. You also can carry over your upgrades from your first playthrough, as always, but perhaps the most interesting thing here is that you actually get an extended ending locked behind hard mode, so you'll need to play the game at least twice to fully experience everything the game has to offer. With all of the trophies you can unlock though, you may find yourself traversing the game a few times if you're not diligent enough, as there are points of no return to pick up collectibles, so make sure you're thorough. You're looking at about 20 hours total to fully see everything you possibly can. A little more if you want to get all the trophies like I did, as one of them requires you to master the ghost hunting minigame, which can take some time and practice. This is of course if you're playing the remastered version on the PS4 or PS5 though. It was one of the PS4 games that came with a free PS5 upgrade, thankfully. You honestly get a lot of content with Fatal Frame 4. Would I say it's scarier than the previous entries? Probably not. It's mid-range when it comes to horror, but it's definitely more fun to play thanks to its improved controls and combat mechanics in my book. You feel like the challenges are genuine and not cheap, which is a good thing in my book. The story is standalone, as I've said many times already, so you can really get this one without the concern if you're going to be lost as to what's going on, but I definitely recommend playing the others as well because they're really good. There's replay value with this one, as just talking about it makes me want to play it again. The mark of a good game. It's just fun, and that's the key element here. It's fun.
If it's not fun, why bother?
Fatal Frame 4 feels like it redesigned how the franchise plays to focus on making the experience more fun, and I'm completely okay with that. Fun is, of course, the most important factor of any game. There are several games that focus on innovation for the sake of innovation, but they don't seem to have any concern if the game is actually fun as long as it's innovating. So many times games will try to expand on what the first game did, but not really care about the fact if those expansions are actually improving the overall enjoyment of the game. Fatal Frame 4 does a bold move by focusing on something different, but something fun as well. Fatal Frame 4 is a deviation from the original trilogy, a very large one at that, but honestly it stands as an excellent game on its own right that feels good to play. It doesn't try to eclipse the originals, no pun intended, but it also tries to keep the DNA from them while doing something different and unique. It's a solid entry, and one that's worth your time and attention. You're getting a pretty great value with Fatal Frame 4, and enough twists and turns to keep you fascinated while not jumping the shark. If you like that classic Asian horror like I do, it's definitely worthy of your time. With the remake of Fatal Frame 2 coming out somewhat recently, maybe there's hope that the Fatal Frame franchise will continue after being dormant for over a decade now. Thank you so much for watching. Subscribe if you want to see more retrospectives on retro or retro-inspired games like this one, or check out the Discord server. There's a link in the description below. As always, I'm WizPlay, and that's enough of that.